Hello, I'm Casey Aiken, and this is 21 This Week. Coming up next, he said, no, she said. Both David Trone and McLean Delaney released polling data showing them ahead in the CD-6 race. They both can't be right, can they? Earth Day 2026, the planet is doing great. Why is there so much gloom and doom? And the race to succeed Mark Elrich as county executive heats up. Our panel of insiders will give you the story behind the story. We're joined by civic activists Cary Lamari and Stacey Sauter, a member of the Montgomery County Republican Central Committee. Stay tuned for these stories and more on the next 21 This Week. And welcome to 21 This Week. We've got a lot to cover today. A high-dollar Democratic primary in the 6th Congressional District that's quickly becoming a battle of billionaires and competing realities. Cary, we're seeing one of the most expensive primaries in Maryland history. David Trone is reported has spent already $10 million of his own money on it. And April McLean Delaney has put over $2.5 million in her campaign. And they both are citing polls that say they're ahead. What's up with this?
It's difficult to say. I mean, both of them have history with that seat, and both of them have done a fine job as a congressman for District 6 in the past, and they're both correct. They're fighting Donald Trump, okay, and his policies. April Delaney is, argued that she's fought the healthcare, lack of budget, that she's fought him, Donald Trump on, the war and numerous other things. Trump can equally argue that he's tried to defend the Democratic public. What can I tell you? It's going to be.
Well, my gosh, Cary, the ads that former Congressman Trone has been running are so. I mean, they're so off-putting that I know many people who just, as soon as they see him, turn them off. Let's go to Stacey. Stacey, Trone's campaign is touting an independent poll showing him ahead, while Delaney is dismissing it as flawed methodology. But at what point do dueling polls serve about two candidates who are so well known?
We're talking about a primary, and if history repeats itself, it may not be very. A lot of public may not attend, may not vote.
Casey, let me pick this up if I may. Honestly, the manipulation never really ends. If you have enough money, you can commission polls until you find one that tells a story you want told. And the bigger question for voters should always be who was polled, what was the sample, what questions were asked, and who paid for it, right? Because those details can shape the outcome as much as the voter sentiment itself. So let's be honest, a lot of campaign polling is designed to inform voters. It's designed to create momentum, influence donors, and sometimes discourage opponents. So it becomes less of a measurement and more messaging. So what concerns me is that while candidates trade the poll releases like press releases, voters still want to and need to know who's talking about traffic, affordability, public safety, economic growth. Polls can become a substitute for substance.
So, we all have recognized so far, and Cary, you touched on it in your opening comments, that both candidates are running against President Trump, or making a big claim about running against President Trump. But we also have to recognize that at some point within this campaign, which is early voting starts in less than 2 months, that the candidates are going to have to focus their attention on one another and not just on Donald Trump.
Well, you also have Chuck Schumer, and he's a problem for the Democratic Party. He really is. He's
Amen.
He has not. I mean, even in this recent vote on sending arms, funding arms, he voted against his own party, or the majority of his own party. So I don't know. Right now, I think the big argument that they need to focus on, and I touched on it earlier with you, is the resetting of the economy. And I'm not going to go into a lot of discussion about it, but on May
Cary,
15th,
I want to let's focus in. Both of these candidates have represented the district. Both of them are well known. And what is going to distinguish each other? They're going to have to start picking on one another soon enough. Stacey, it may all be well and good to campaign against President Trump in the Democratic primary, but doesn't that open the door to a Republican candidate running on local issues and saying, "Hey, what have you done for me here? How have you impacted me in my life in Montgomery County when I'm strangling on traffic, when I'm strangling with a depressed economy?"
Absolutely can, Casey. And because voters eventually want a candidate running for something, not just against someone. And we may be seeing early evidence of that in places people assume to be political lockdown, like in California. Look at Steve Hilton. He's a Republican making early headway in a very blue environment by
you
talking
got to
about
remember
living, competence, and quality of life. In Maryland, politicians should pay attention because, in some ways, we are a microcosm of California, expensive housing, regulatory bloat, infrastructure strain, and voters growing frustrated by the minute with one party governance. If Democrats make every race a referendum on Donald Trump, leaving really critical local issues on the table.
it's
All
the
right, Cary, I'm
Republicans.
going to give you the last word. You got about 30 seconds.
It's the Republicans that is depressing the economy. See, that's the thing. So, and I think whatever Republican candidate you put up, you're going to have Democrats saying, it's your fault. It's Trump. So
Well,
in a way, everybody, both the Republican candidate and the Democrats, are going to be fighting
Well,
Trump.
Mary, I cry foul on that.
Stacey, I'm sorry, you're going to have to hold that thought till next time because we have to go on to our next topic, which is the executive race here in Montgomery County, which is becoming very highly contested. There are 5 Democrats running to succeed Mark Elrich as county executive, 3 of whom are on the county council, Evan Glass, Will Jawando, and Andrew Friedson. And we're not even talking yet about what impact their votes will be on the Montgomery County budget. And what little polling that has been conducted, Glass and Jawanda have some early advantages over Friedson, but Friedson seems to have a large campaign chest. Cary, you're less than 2 months before early voting. Who's the front runner in this race?
I'd have to say right this minute, I would say Evan Glass. But I still believe that this is Andrew Friedson's race to lose. He's because of the money that he's got. You got to remember, you've got 3 different philosophies. Friedson is heavy into residential apartment growth, okay? Multiplex housing. Will Jawando, very far left, tenants' rights, policies that, are interesting, but they ignore the realities for the moderate Democrat. And then you got Evan Glass. Evan Glass, like I said last week, is at least looking at today's relevant issues and trying to, dissect them. Okay. And I give him credit for that because the other 2 are not doing that.
Stacey, even though he won the last 2 elections, Mark Elrich was so toxic to many in the county that there were not 1, but 2 term limit initiatives that were passed. Yet Republicans haven't been competitive for a long time. Putting on a different spin on this, what do you see in this Democratic primary that the candidates themselves aren't talking about or addressing?
Well, Casey, I think first of all we need to address the fact that we're not talking about how structurally insulated this system has become. Frankly, Republicans would be more competitive if the playing field were more open. Currently, there are debates going on across the county where Republican candidates aren't even invited. This includes not inviting Weird and Sullivan to be present at an NAOIP debate, NAOIP being a large commercial real estate development association of which he's a member, and you're probably familiar with it. There are organizations grading candidates who won't even evaluate Republicans until after the Democratic primaries, including the Greater Capital Area Association of Realtors, or GCAR. That should tell voters something. They're being shut out too. And beyond that, nobody is talking about institutional self-protection, I think. what I mean by that is the degree to which the bureaucracy, unions, advocacy groups, and political networks reinforce one another and the Democrats. So the irony is voters want competition. Competition makes government better, but too often the system suppresses competition. That to me is one serious subtext of this race that nobody wants to openly discuss.
Well, you're forgetting something though. The Republican candidates don't have competition in the Republican race. The Democrats do. They have challengers. So that's why. Now, and I'm not justifying it. You want to give everybody a platform, and I agree with that. All right, but I can understand because I've participated in these debates, in debates in the past. There's not a lot of time. And if you've got competition amongst a certain race, you want to listen to the candidates that are competing with each other. So as much
Cary, I don't know. Let me just interject for one
this is
second.
a primary.
When there were in 2000, when there was a race to replace Betty Ann Kroenke in a special election, all of the candidate fields were filled with both Republican and Democrats in that field. Both Howie Dennis and Mary Kane were running, and they were on the same dais with Roger Berliner and Pat Baptiste, and amongst others. So it's not impossible to do, and it's probably fair to the voters. Stacey,
I would think that's a general election, not a primary. Okay, once you have the Republican candidates on the.
Excuse me for interrupting, but there are competitive primaries among Republicans, not as many as the Democrats, of course. But the point is that what the Democrats are saying, that even in those contested primaries, they don't want to endorse anybody. They want to wait until after the primary, and then they'll evaluate the Republican candidates. That is so grossly unfair, because if the Republicans need an opportunity to be on the same platform as the Democrats so people can hear the contrast, but they're not getting that.
So let's just go back and focus in on the candidates themselves. And Stacey, I'm going to ask you the question. In the last two elections, David Blair ran as a moderate and did quite well against Mark Elridge. And in this case, we see very different lanes. Jawanda is running on the progressive policy, Glass often emphasizing representation and coalition building, and Friedson is said to be running, on behalf of those who are looking to build on a more robust economy. So, are the voters how are the voters going to look at these candidates this time, do you think?
I think that you're going to see it, and to Cary's point earlier, that Andrew Friedson has a very large treasure chest. And I think it's highly likely, even if he kicks into high gear at the last minute, he's going to do a big spend. I personally think that Andrew Friedson is probably going to get the nomination. I would love to see it be Will Jawando, because we have an unbelievable candidate, Esther Wells, running for county executive. And this is a woman, she will hit right at the heart of what the voters are looking for right now: accountability and transparency. She's a CPA, she has a master's in taxation, and she's an executive at a major utility company. She knows the issues, and she's got children in the Montgomery County public school system. So she has the ability to really present a stark contrast to either one of those candidates and really hone in on those issues that are of great importance and common sense issues that I think that she'll be able to really address quite well.
Thank you. And Cary, I'm going to give you the last word.
You've got
wait a minute. Let me ask the question, Cary. The question is, Evan Glass and Friedson not far enough left for Democratic voters?
I don't think that's even the issue at this point. I mean, the Democratic Party right now is looking at affordability. They're looking at the issues that affect their livelihoods, as well as their quality of life. We saw that with the Silver Bill.
You got to wrap it up.
I think you have three charming candidates there, different perspectives. The public's going to have to decide.
Well, I apologize to the two of you and to the audience for the allergy attack I'm having. And when we return from this short break, we'll be celebrating Earth Day and all the pollen that I've consumed. Stay tuned. Welcome back. Earth Day was celebrated this past Wednesday, April 22nd, and for the past 50 plus years, the environmental movement has focused on clean air and clean water, issues that have broad public support and produce tangible results. But today, the debate it seems to have shifted to less about pollution and more about land use, energy policy, and economic growth, raising new questions. Has the environmental movement moved and evolved to meet modern challenges, or has it just become a barrier to growth and development? And nowhere is that tension clearer than in the debate over data centers that are critical to the modern economy, but increasingly opposed at the local level. Stacey, critics argue that modern environmental policy is just about protectionism. Is that a fair characterization?
I think that there's some fairness to that critique. I mean, clean air, clean water, stewardship of the environment, those have always been core environmental values. And what's changed, I think, is the accretion of litigation and layers of bureaucracy that dictate policy far beyond what legislatures intended. And fortunately, we're seeing that that's being challenged. You see it politically, but also legally in recent landmark Supreme Court cases like Loper Bright versus Raimondo and West Virginia versus EPA that overturned the 40-year-old, is it Chevron doctrine? Chevron deference doctrine. And these decisions significantly limit the power of federal agencies to interpret their own regulatory authority. So what we were seeing was that like these overreaching, far-reaching regulations. And, you look at the water supply in California, for example, and they're protecting the smelt fish or something crazy like that. And so now with the relaxation of these rules and policies and laws a little bit, we'll see. We'll see what happens. I think most Americans want conservation. I'm clearly in that camp, just not the kind of command and control that I think can.
Well, just remember, it all started with the snail darter. Anyway, Cary, here in Maryland, Governor Wes Moore is pushing clean energy expansion and regulations of large energy users. But, it seems to me there's a dichotomy here. We all love our cell phones, right? We all love the technology that comes from these, but we are so afraid of producing new energy. And, so are Marylanders' environmental goals aligned with energy reality?
I think there's a conflict between the economy and our policies, okay? And I think that's the biggest problem. You're absolutely correct. We need to deal with the issues with respect to, water, electricity, as well as noise that comes from data centers. We can do that, but we can do that in a comprehensive fashion. But do we have the money to do that? And if we don't have the money, do we have the capability to negotiate that with the private sector as well as the adjacent jurisdictions? Because these are the conflicts. But we forgot. It goes back to like even the electric vehicles. We are forgetting. We've made commitments to these environmental issues, but then for economic reasons, they fall back. They fall to the wayside. We're not going to be building. Taking
Nobody
over
wanted them, Cary. The reason they stopped selling them is because nobody wanted them, or not enough people wanted them without the subsidies. Why? You hit it on the nail on the head when you said, "Do we have the money?" Government doesn't have the money. It's the private sector that has the money. And Stacey, the Wall Street Journal reports that in the past 2 years, activists have halted roughly $18 billion in data center construction and have delayed another $46 billion in data center construction. At what point does activism stop being about environmental protection and just stopping progress?
So, it's like anything. And Cary and I agree on this point, I think, wholeheartedly. And that you need to do these things in increments, right? And so, but you have to work together on them and you have to understand where the greatest needs are and then try to build these things on an incremental level so that they're not overpowering the environment and that but they are also providing a sustainable amount of energy in the area, also without wrecking the environment. I just think that there are ways to balance this out. But if you just each come from these hardcore positions and you're not trying to find compromise on the issues, then all we're going to hear is this blather going on while the data centers continue to be built. Right?
Well,
I don't have a simple solution for it. People have to put their heads together.
Cary, you got the last word.
you know, again, I mean, if we're talking about data centers in Maryland, our neighbors, Loudoun County, and in Northern Virginia, they got the head start on us. They didn't bother including us in any of the discussions. And then today, the water level in the Potomac River is dangerously low intake water for people's homes, so that people can live. And we're using that water for these data centers across the river. We own the river. And there's very little communication and cooperation on how we deal with that. So if we want data centers here in Maryland, there has to be regional cooperation, which we don't have.
Thank you, Cary. I'm sorry I got to cut you off, but I want to just spend a few minutes talking about property taxes and property taxes increases here in Montgomery County. There are competing plans as to how to balance the budget this year. The plan that Mark Elrich put forward and the plan that the council president put forward. Cary, why don't you start? We've only got 4 minutes for this segment. Why don't you talk a little bit about those two plans and what impact they will have on Montgomery County residents?
It's difficult to talk about the two plans in and of themselves. Essentially, do you want to have a 6.5% increase in taxes? The other one wants to throw it onto income taxes, increasing the income tax rate for Montgomery County. And then Juwando has one that's extremely unclear, how he plans to meet his recommended expenditures by not increasing taxes. No one knows. But you got to understand, right now, the single family homes are accepting all of the burden on this. And, you've got programs like the pilot program, payment in lieu of taxes, where new apartment buildings are going to get tax abatements for 15 to 20 years. And regularly, apartment buildings are considered commercial and are not going to have to pay any taxes. So it's all thrown on the single family property owner or townhouse owner. Is that fair?
Well, Stacey, what do you think?
Listen, I think Cary has a very valid point there, but on the other hand, you have to look at what they've done. They've driven a stake in the development here of multifamily housing because of the rent control. And so the developers are fleeing. And how else can you incentivize them to build? And so that's certainly one way to go about it. Maybe if they really need to do that, maybe the period of time, not over 20 years, but maybe a shorter period of time to give them some incentive to build, because
they're doing it.
Need more housing.
15 to 20 years is the standard right now. And I guess Mr. Friedson is actually the author of all of that. So that's just the reality. It was approved and thrived.
I agree with you at all, because I feel like you're paying, we're all homeowners. And my property taxes just went up $200 a month. It's not going to get any better, especially if we're not getting that burden shared by people who were probably quite capable of pitching in.
Well, that's the thing. I think the commercial industry, commercial portions we need to encourage commercial growth, but we also need to encourage commercial growth to pay for itself.
Well, how about cutting some spending, Cary? I mean, we always do the Montgomery County two-step, where we propose big tax increases, then back off on them when the budget's getting passed, but we never cut anything. Why don't we cut some spending for a change?
Well, that's part of it.
Because
that's a large part of it.
As Stacey indicated, she now has to put $200 more per month in her real estate taxes. That means $200 more are not available to her for other uses and other purposes. She might like to save that money to go on a vacation. I mean,
it's about time that our county government starts to look at our budget and deal with it with a scalpel instead of a sledgehammer. And when I say that, they're adding to it with a sledgehammer instead of cutting with a scalpel.
All right. So here's the $24 question. And this is the exit question for both of you. Name one county council member who's ever proposed a budget cut in their lives.
Right now, you got Fanny Gonzalez.
You leave me speechless, Cary. For a
I
day.
leave myself speechless.
You got me. Stacey, last word.
Certainly
Yeah,
not out in the open. They may have discussed it in committee, but they would certainly not discuss it publicly.
All right. Stay tuned for parting shots when we come back from the short break.
Thank you.
And welcome back. Now with parting shots, Cary Lamari.
Okay, the school board is actually sent out a survey on requesting, parents to say how to give suggestions on how we handle filling in those school days that we miss during the winter and these other times. And I'd like to remind the school board, a lot of the teachers do have summer school, and with summer school that means they only have a week before the summer school and a week after, which makes it difficult. Some of these people rent places for the summer, in that creates a problem. I think that we need to look at online video, in my opinion, video classes for missing, filling in that lost time during the school year.
Thanks,
Just my 2
Cary.
cents.
Stacey Sauter, your parting shot.
Casey, first, thanks for inviting me to join you today. It's always a pleasure. And listen, it is campaign season, and the MCGOP is in high gear right now. We have some really incredible Republican candidates running this year, from Esther Wells, I mentioned her earlier, for county executive. We've got Reardon Sally Sullivan for council in District 1. There's a long list. If you have any interest in learning more about them, our slate of candidates, you can go to www.mcgop.com, and you'll find the candidates and the links to their respective websites. Thank you.
And thank you. And thank you both for putting up with me this week and every week, but especially this week when I was having an allergy attack. And I want to thank the audience for tuning in each and every week to Montgomery County's hardest hitting political talk show. For 21 this week, I'm Casey Aiken.